There's a hard hat that's hung on the same hook by the plant's side door for 26 years. White. Scuffed at the crown. A strip of masking tape across the front where somebody typed my name into a label maker the week I turned 16 and got it wrong. Meredith. Boy. Nobody ever corrected it. I'm Meredith Calder. I'm 41. And for 15 years at nearly every holiday table my family sat around, somebody said the same 6 words about me. In the same fond, easy tone you'd use for a relative you'd quietly stopped expecting anything from. Meredith's the safe one. My mother would say, passing the potatoes. Tyler's the one with the instincts. This is the story of what happens when the safe one turns out to be the only one in the room who was actually paying attention. And what she says out loud, finally, at her own family's dinner table the night everything came apart. Welcome back to Hidden Revenge Stories. Somebody's ever called you responsible, like it was a consolation prize? Stay with me. Drop a comment when you get to the part where she finally answers back. Subscribe. You're going to want to see the rest of this. Calder Millworks was my great-grandfather's company, built in 1962 in the same river town 3 generations of us grew up in. My father, Walter, ran it like it was an extension of his own bloodline because by the time I was born it mostly was. My brother Tyler was 3 years younger, and from the time he could talk in full sentences he was the heir. I remember standing in the kitchen doorway one Saturday morning, maybe 7 years old, watching my father button his flannel and grab his keys. "Can I come to the plant today?" I asked him. He didn't even turn around. "Not today, Mare. Tyler's coming with me. Big boy stuff." He ruffled Tyler's hair on the way out. Tyler was 4. I sat in the truck instead most Saturdays with my homework waiting for them to come back out. Nobody ever asked if I minded. I don't think it occurred to anyone that there was a question to ask. The one person who ever seemed to notice was my Aunt Carol, my father's older sister, who came to Sunday dinner most weeks and always found a reason to sit near me. She was the kind of woman who asked a kid a real question and then actually waited for the answer. "What are you working on there, Mare Bear?" she asked me once, nodding at the workbook in my lap while my father and Tyler were still out in the truck. "Fractions," I said. "You like them?" "Yeah. They make sense. There's always a right answer." She smiled at that, a little sadly, like she understood something about the sentence that I didn't yet. "Some things should work that way," she said. "Most things don't. You hang on to liking the ones that do." When I turned 16, my father had a hat made for me. I think he meant it kindly. A way of saying you belong here too without changing anything about how the place actually worked. He handed it to me at dinner, pleased with himself. "There," he said. "Now you're official." I wore it twice. The second time, a foreman named Dwayne laughed and said, "Watch out, here comes Miss Meredith." And everybody on the floor laughed with him, easy and warm, the way you laugh at something that isn't really about you. I hung it on the hook by the side door that afternoon and never wore it again. My father never noticed the label was wrong, or that my name was not spelt correctly. I don't think anyone did except me and except Carol, who found me sitting on the back porch steps that evening, not crying exactly, just very quiet. "You okay?" she asked, sitting down next to me. "They spelled my name wrong," I said. "On the hat." Nobody even noticed. She was quiet a moment. Then she said, "Some people only see what they expect to see, honey. It's not about you. It's about how little looking they're willing to do." She put her arm around me. "You keep noticing things, Mare. Don't let them talk you out of that. One day it's going to matter more than anything else about you." I didn't understand what she meant for a long time. I understand it now. I was better at math than Tyler, and it wasn't close. At 14 I started going over my father's expense reports for extra allowance money, and one summer I found a lumber supplier who'd overbilled us by just over $9,000. Spread carefully across 4 invoices so it wouldn't jump out at a casual glance. "Dad," I said, sliding the invoices across the kitchen table, proud. Waiting for something. He looked. He whistled low. "Good eye, kiddo." He patted my shoulder once and turned back to the TV. I stood there a second longer than I needed to, waiting for the rest of the sentence. It never came. Tyler, at 17, put the company delivery truck into a loading dock hard enough to crack the headlight housing. That same night, over dinner, my father laughed about it, shaking his head. "That's a real Calder for you," he said, grinning at Tyler like he'd done something admirable. Fearless. Just like his old man. I sat there with my fork halfway to my mouth and thought, $9,000 nobody mentioned again, and a busted headlight is fearless. I didn't say it out loud. I never said any of it out loud. That's most of what this story is. Actually, 26 years of things I noticed and never once said, and one aunt who was the only person who ever told me that noticing was worth something. The succession happened the year Tyler turned 28. My father called it a ceremony. There was a write-up in the regional paper, a photo of the two of them shaking hands in front of the plant sign. And a party after at the country club, a sheet cake shaped like the company's original 1962 delivery truck. My father stood up in front of 80 guests with a champagne glass in his hand. 28 years ago, he said, "My father handed me the keys to this place, and tonight I get to do the same thing for my son." He pulled out an actual set of brass keys, to the executive office, and pressed them into Tyler's palm like scripture. The room clapped. Somebody near the front got a little teary. I sat at a table near the back with my husband Ben and Carol on my other side. Ben leaned over. "You okay?" "I'm fine. I want to watch the whole thing." Carol reached under the table and squeezed my hand once. Hard. And didn't say anything at all. He didn't need to. My father wasn't finished. He turned, glass still raised, and found me at the back of the room. "And Meredith," he said warmly, like an afterthought he was proud of remembering it all. "Meredith's always been the safe and less calculated one. Tyler's the one with the instincts and grit. That's just how these two turned out, I guess." He laughed. 80 people laughed with him. I laughed too. "I want you to sit with that because it matters." I laughed along with everyone else, the way you learn to laugh at a wound so nobody can see exactly where it landed. My face hurt afterward from how hard I'd had to hold the smile. Later that night, in the car, Ben was quiet for a long time before he finally said something. "He handed your brother actual keys. In front of everyone. Did he even once mention what you do for a living?" "No. Does that bother you?" I looked out the window at the dark fields going by, and for the first time all night I felt something in my heart come loose just slightly. "It used to," I said, my voice cracking a little on the word used, which surprised me more than it surprised him. "I think I'm done being bothered by it. I think I'm going to do something else with it instead." I didn't know yet exactly what that meant. But something in me had quietly closed a door that night. The kind you don't slam, you just stop leaving open. If a room's ever laughed at you and called it love, you know exactly the feeling I'm describing. With me. For the next several years, my career looked exactly like what my family already assumed it was. I worked as an analyst at a regional investment firm, and at Thanksgiving my mother would ask, "So, how's the numbers thing going?" in the same tone she might ask about a hobby. There's one dinner I still think about more than the others, because it's the clearest proof of something I didn't have a name for yet. Tyler was maybe 3 years into running the company, and he was talking frustrated about a client they kept almost landing and losing to a competitor on price. Without really thinking about it, because it was an easy, obvious read from the numbers he'd just described, I said, "You should stop competing with them on price entirely. Pivot the pitch to lead time instead. You can turn around custom orders in half the time they can. That's worth more to a builder than saving 4% on unit cost." Tyler frowned at his plate. "That's not really how this business works, Mare." My father nodded along with him. Nobody said anything else about it. I finished my dinner and drove home. 14 months later, at a different family dinner, Tyler announced, to real enthusiasm, my father actually standing up to shake his hand, that he'd figured out the client's whole hang-up was price, and that the real fix was repositioning the pitch around turnaround time instead. My father called it visionary. My mother said, "See, Meredith, that's the instinct your brother has." I sat there with a full glass of wine I didn't touch and said nothing because I had already learned, 14 months earlier and about 30 years before that, exactly what happened to things I said out loud in that house. They didn't disappear. They just stopped having my name on them by the time anyone was willing to admire them. I told Carol about it on the phone that week, my voice tighter than I meant it to sound. He said it back to them a year later like it was his, I said. And they applauded him for it. I know it hurts, Carol said. But I want you to hear something, and I mean this as a gift, not a lecture. The idea was never the valuable part, Meredith. You have 100 more where that came from. What they don't have, what they've never had, is the patience to build something quietly. For 6 years without needing anyone to clap. That's the part they can't steal because they don't even know it exists. 6 years ago I started my own fund with 2 partners, Priya and Colin. Ironbridge Holdings. Small, unglamorous, focused on exactly the kind of struggling regional manufacturers nobody flashy wanted to touch. When I told my mother, she said, "Oh, that's nice, sweetie. Are you sure you can handle that?" "It's a good opportunity, Mom." "Well, you'd know. You're the cautious one." She meant it as a compliment. I heard it the way I'd heard every version of that sentence my whole life. 3 years in, a regional business journal ran a 2-paragraph piece on Ironbridge's turnaround of a distressed textile finisher. Our first real success, the deal that proved the model worked. Carol clipped it out of the paper and mailed it to me with a sticky note that just said, "Proud of you always. Have been." I never found out whether anyone else in my family saw the article. Nobody ever mentioned it. I kept Carol's note in my desk drawer for years, and I kept the old misspelled hard hat in a box in my office closet the entire time I built that company. I couldn't have told you exactly why. I think some part of me wasn't ready to throw away the one object that had ever told the truth about how closely anyone in my family was paying attention. If you've had an idea handed back to you with someone else's name on it, feel free to comment and share that experience. Calder Millworks started slipping about 8 years into Tyler's tenure. He pushed an expansion the company couldn't really afford, financed against equipment we'd owned outright for a decade. It underperformed almost immediately. A major client left within the year. What I didn't know yet, what nobody outside a small circle at the bank knew yet, was what happened after that. When the original loan needed restructuring and the equipment alone wasn't enough collateral to secure the new terms, my father did something he never told me, never told my mother the full shape of, and never once mentioned at a single dinner table. He personally guaranteed the refinancing against the house. Our house. The one on Birch Lane with the porch he'd built himself the summer I was 9. He signed it over as collateral on a business loan for a company that was already failing, because he could not, after 28 years of telling this town who a Calder was, be the man who let it go under on his watch. At dinner, my father would wave a hand and say the same thing every time. "It's just a rough patch. The market's been brutal. Tyler's doing everything right." One night my mother actually turned to me, a rare thing, and asked almost as an afterthought, "Meredith, you understand this business stuff. What do you think's going on with the company?" I felt my whole heart go still. 16 years of silence, and here was the door cracked open an inch. "Honestly, Mom," I said carefully, "from what I've seen, the expansion was over-leveraged from the start and—" "Oh, don't be dramatic," my father cut in, laughing. "Tyler renegotiated better terms on that loan just last month. He's handling it." He turned back to Tyler. "Tell her about the new client you're about to land." I closed my mouth around the rest of the sentence and swallowed it the way I'd swallowed 30 years of them. I already knew from paperwork that crossed my desk through channels that had nothing to do with my family, that the new client had signed with a competitor 6 weeks earlier, and that the renegotiated loan was just the old default pushed further down the road at a worse rate. I did not yet know about the house. Nobody had told me about the house. I wouldn't learn that part until it was already sitting in a file on my own desk months later in my own handwriting on a legal pad underlined twice. I called Carol that night from my car outside my own house, because I couldn't quite bring myself to go in yet. "They're going to lose the company, Carol. I can see it happening. Nobody will listen to me." "Have you tried telling them plainly?" "Not hinting. Just telling them." "I've tried for 16 years, I said, and something in my throat closed up. "I don't think there's a version of the truth I could say that would land in that house." Carol was quiet a moment. "Then maybe you stop trying to hand it to them and start deciding what you're going to do with it instead." The call came into Ironbridge on an ordinary Tuesday. Priya set a folder on my desk. A distressed Regional manufacturer quietly shopping for a buyer before liquidation, the name redacted the way. These documents always are early on. I read 4 lines and knew exactly whose plant it was. I'd had that address memorized since I was 7 years old, waiting in a truck outside it. My hands went cold. I sat with the folder closed most of that morning, unable to touch it again. When I finally opened it that afternoon alone, door shut, I read straight through the loan documentation the way I'd read 100 others, until I got to the collateral schedule on page 11 and found a residential property listed against the refinancing guarantee. Birch Lane. My father's signature notarized, 18 months old. Sole personal guarantor. I sat very still for a long time. I want to be honest about what I felt because it wasn't clean. Some part of me, a part I'm not proud of, felt something close to vindication. 29 years of the safe one, and here was proof in black and white of exactly how unsafe his instincts had actually been the whole time. And underneath that, immediately, something much heavier. If this deal closed on the terms already on the table, the house I grew up in, the porch, the kitchen table, the room where Carol used to sit with me on the back steps, would be sold to satisfy the guarantee. Not eventually. As a condition of the restructuring itself. I called Ben that night, my voice not quite steady. It's not just the company, I told him. It's the house too. Dad put the house up as collateral, and I don't think he ever told Mom the whole truth of. If I do this, if Ironbridge does this, they lose Birch Lane. Not maybe. As part of the deal. There was a long silence on the line. Do you want to do it anyway? He asked gently, no judgment in it at all. I don't know yet, I said. I need you to not tell me it's fine either way. I need to sit with what it actually costs before I decide anything. I called Carol too that same night. I told her everything, the folder, the collateral schedule, the house. She was quiet for a long moment. Meredith, she said finally, I'm not going to tell you what to do with this. I don't think that's mine to hand you. But I will tell you this. Your father built a life on people not looking too closely at what he was doing. You have spent 29 years being the only one who ever did look closely. I don't think it's a coincidence that the truth landed on your desk. And nobody else's. I sat with that folder closed on my kitchen table for 3 full days before I told Priya and Colin to move forward. I want you to know that. It wasn't an easy call I made in an afternoon. I understood exactly what I was choosing, and I chose it anyway with my eyes open the entire time, because I had also spent years watching my father choose the version of the truth that was easiest for him to live with, and I decided finally that I wasn't going to do the same thing with mine. Tyler called me one evening during due diligence, not knowing I had anything to do with it. He just wanted to vent. Some funds circling the company, he said, rawness in his voice I wasn't used to hearing. Vultures, honestly. I wish just once somebody in this family understood what it actually takes to run something real instead of just analyzing other people's numbers from the sidelines. I let that sit for a second longer than was comfortable. I hope it works out for you, Tyler. I really do. Yeah, he said quieter. Mare, can I tell you something? I'm scared. I don't know how to fix this, and I don't know how to tell Dad that. I feel like I'm drowning. You're allowed to be scared, I said softly. That doesn't make you less of anything. He had no idea. It would be weeks before he understood exactly how much. My father did more than make phone calls trying to identify us. What I learned only after the deal closed, from Priya, who heard it secondhand from the broker, was that 3 weeks before closing, my father had spent the better part of a week calling in every favor he had left in that industry, trying to arrange a rival bid. He called Harlan Pierce, a competitor 2 counties over he'd known for 30 years, and asked him flatly to make an offer on Calder Millworks, any offer at almost any price, specifically so the company wouldn't fall into the hands of some faceless fund nobody in this business has ever heard of. Pierce turned him down, told him, according to Priya's second-hand account, that the numbers Ironbridge had already put on the table were better than anything he could justify matching, and that he wasn't in the business of overpaying to protect another man's pride. I didn't know about that call until much later. But I want you to understand it happened because it means the version of events where my father was simply a passive, wounded party isn't the true one. He was still fighting right up until the end to keep this away from a stranger he just had no idea The stranger was me, and no idea that fighting harder only meant he'd have further to fall when he found out who'd actually been on the other side of the table the whole time. 3 days before the closing, the company held its 60th anniversary dinner. Smaller than the succession party, just family and a handful of longtime employees at the house, my mother's good china out. Carol was there too, sitting close to me the way she always did. My father stood at the head of the table with his wine glass. 60 years, he said. My grandfather built this with his hands. My father handed it to me. I handed it to Tyler. He smiled around the table. And Meredith's been around, playing quietly through all of it, cheering us on from the sidelines. I felt Carol's hand find mine under the table and I set my fork down. Actually, Dad, I need to tell you something, and I think everyone at this table should hear it. Together. The table went quiet the way a room goes quiet when someone speaks who never speaks. 6 years ago I started an investment fund. Ironbridge Holdings. 4 months ago Calder Millworks came across our desk. It was headed for forced liquidation within the year. I looked at my father. I'm the buyer, Dad. I'm the managing partner of the fund that's closing on this company Thursday morning. What are you talking about? My father said, setting his glass down hard enough that wine slopped over the rim. You knew, he said slowly once it landed. This whole time. Every dinner. Every time I called around trying to find out who Ironbridge was, you knew, and you sat there and said nothing. I did, I said. I want to tell you, this went the way it went in every version of this story you've ever seen, where the anger cracks open into tears and everyone ends up holding hands by dessert. It didn't. My father's face didn't soften. It hardened. You let this happen on purpose, he said, standing up now, his voice climbing in a way I hadn't heard since I was a child. You had every chance to come to me directly like a daughter, and instead you did this ambush in front of everyone 3 days before it closes when there's nothing anyone can do about it. That's not honesty, Meredith. That's cruelty wearing a business suit. I'm not the one who's been lying at this table for 2 years about renegotiated terms that never existed, I said, and my own voice had an edge in it I didn't try to soften. I'm not the one who mortgaged this house without telling his wife. My mother's head snapped up. What did you say? My father's face went the color of the tablecloth. Meredith. He put the house up, Mom, I said, and I hated how flat and clinical it came out, but I couldn't find a gentler way to say something this large. Birch Lane. 18 months ago as collateral on the refinancing. It's in the loan file. It has his signature on it. My mother stood up so fast her chair scraped hard against the floor. Walter. Just his name, but it carried more than a sentence could have. I was going to fix it, my father said, and for the first time all night his voice cracked, though not yet with grief, with something closer to cornered panic. I was going to fix it before anyone had to know. You don't get to decide that anymore, I said quietly. None of us do. It's already done. The deal closes Thursday on the terms that are already signed, and I am not in a position to change those terms even if I wanted to, because I'm not the only partner at my fund, and this was never only my decision to unmake. Tyler had gone completely white. The house, he said. Dad, you put up the house? I was protecting this family, my father said, and I watched him reach for the sentence like a man grabbing a rail on a ship that was already going down. Everything I have ever done in my life has been to protect this family. And I do not get a say in that, though, do I? I said, and I let every year of it into my voice for the first time in my life. That's what you've told me since I was 7 years old. I don't have the instincts. I don't get consulted. And now you want me to have understood silently 29 years in advance that you'd eventually need me to save the thing you never once let me be part of. Nobody said anything. My mother was crying, but it wasn't the kind that invites comfort. It was the kind that comes from a woman realizing she has been kept in the dark inside her own marriage. For a year and a half. Tyler wouldn't look at anyone. My father sat back down slowly and put his face in his hands, and for a long moment the only sound in that dining room was my mother's ragged breathing and the tick of the clock over the sideboard. I didn't stay for dessert. I gathered my coat and Carol walked out with me, and neither of us said anything until we were both standing on the porch in the cold. That went the way it needed to go, Carol said quietly. Not the way anyone wanted it to. Those aren't the same thing, and I think you already know that. I don't feel good, Carol. You're not supposed to, honey, she said. Not yet. If you've ever told the truth at a table and watched it break something instead of fixing it, stay with me. This part isn't over. The closing happened Thursday morning, exactly as scheduled because the papers had been signed. Weeks before any of them knew my name was on the other side of the table. I want to walk you through what that actually meant in plain terms because I think it matters that nobody soften this. For anyone, including me. The restructuring terms required the personal guarantee to be satisfied as part of the transaction. Birch Lane went up for sale within 6 weeks. My parents had 90 days to vacate. There was no clause I inserted to protect it, no side agreement, no quiet accommodation. I want to be honest with you. I could have tried to build one. I had enough control over the deal structure that a different version of me might have carved out an exception quietly so nobody in that town would ever have to know a Calder lost the family home. I didn't do that. I sat with the decision for 3 days before the deal closed, the same 3 days I'd already sat with it once before, and I came to the same answer both times. The consequence was real and it was theirs, and softening it for them would have meant, one more time, treating the truth as something too dangerous for my family to actually have to live inside of. The town found out within a month, the way small river towns always find out everything eventually. Someone at the bank mentioned it to someone at the country club, and by the time the for sale sign went up on the Birch Lane lawn, half the guest list from that succession party already knew. My mother stopped going to her book club. My father, who had golfed at the same club every Saturday for over 20 years, quietly let his membership lapse rather than face the version of the room that no longer looked at him the way it used to. Carol told me later that at the next Chamber of Commerce dinner, the same event where he'd once put his hand on Tyler's shoulder and called him the future in front of 200 people, nobody mentioned his name from the podium at all. He wasn't invited to sit at the head table for the first time in 11 years. I didn't celebrate any of this. I want to be honest about that too. There were nights that month I lay awake feeling like I'd lit a fire in a house I used to live in and then just watched it burn from a safe distance, telling myself the distance made it not my fault. It did and it didn't. Both things were true at once, and I had to learn to hold both without letting either one lie to me. My father showed up at my house on a Sunday afternoon, 6 weeks after the closing, 3 weeks after they'd moved into a rented townhouse on the other side of town. I hadn't spoken to him since the dinner. He hadn't called first. He just stood on my porch in a coat that looked too big for him. Now, like he'd lost weight he didn't have to spare, and asked if he could come in. I stood in the doorway and didn't move aside. I don't think I'm ready for this, I told him, and it was the truest sentence I'd said to him in 29 years. Meredith, please. I've thought about what to say for 6 weeks. I believe you, I said. I'm not saying that to be cruel. I believe you've thought about it. I don't think you've earned the chance to say it yet. He stood there on the porch and I watched something in his face crumble in a way I had genuinely never seen. Not at the dinner, not at the closing, not once in my whole life. I lost the house, he said, and I keep thinking that's the thing I'm supposed to be grieving, and some nights it is. But most nights, Meredith, I lie awake and the thing I actually can't stop thinking about is a hard hat with your name spelled wrong on it, hanging on a hook for 26 years, and the fact that I looked at that thing probably 1,000 times and never once saw it as anything other than background. I felt my throat close. I didn't let it show. I need you to go home, Dad, I said. Not forever. Today. I don't have anything for you today. He nodded slowly, like a man who understood he didn't get to argue with that. He said. Okay. He turned and walked back down the steps, and I stood in my doorway and watched him go, and I did not cry until his car was all the way out of sight down the street. Ben found me still, standing there a few minutes later, and didn't say anything. He just put his arms around me and let me stand there as long as I needed to. I called Carol that night. I sent him away, I said. Good, she said without a beat of hesitation. That was yours to decide, and you decided it. Nobody gets to skip the part where it actually costs something to be forgiven, Meredith. Not even him. He came back 5 weeks later. He called first this time and asked if we could meet somewhere. Neutral, and I picked a diner halfway between our two lives, the kind with vinyl booths and bad coffee that refills itself before you ask. He was already in the booth when I got there, and he looked older than 6 weeks should have made him look. He didn't try to hug me. He just waited until I sat down and said, "I'm not here to ask you to undo anything. I know you can't, and I don't think I'd ask you to even if you could. I'm here because I want to know if there's a version of this where you and I get to have a relationship again. And I want you to tell me honestly what that would take, because I don't trust myself to guess right anymore." I'd had 5 weeks to think about exactly what I would say if this moment came. 3 things, I said. First, you don't get to tell this story to anyone ever as something that happened to you. Something you built one decision at a time over 29 years, and I need you to be able to say that plainly before I believe you understand it. Second, I'm not doing advisory dinners or board update calls where we pretend this is just business now. If we rebuild something, it's slow and it's real, and it doesn't come with a title. Third, and this was the hardest one to say out loud, you don't get to apologize once and consider the account settled. I need this to be something you keep choosing for longer than feels fair to you before I fully believe it. He was quiet a long moment. That's fair, he said finally. All 3. Even the last one. Especially the last one. I didn't forgive him completely that day. I want to be clear about that because I think it's the part that matters most. I agreed to a monthly dinner, just the 2 of us, no Tyler, no my mother, nothing performed for an audience. It took the better part of a year before I said anything to him that didn't feel measured, before I laughed once, actually laughed at something he said, and caught myself feeling surprised by it. Tyler's road back was different and in its own way harder, because he had to earn something he'd never had to earn before. A real job evaluated on real merit with no name on the door to protect him. Ironbridge kept him on as plant operations manager, reporting to a board he had no seat on. The first quarterly report he gave months later he gave to me, clearly and competently, without a trace of the old swagger. Afterward he lingered in my office doorway. "Can I ask you something?" he said. "Do you think I'm actually good at this? Or am I just the only one who knows the plant well enough to keep the lights on?" "I think," I said carefully, "you were never given the room to find out which one it was your whole life. I think you might actually be good at this, Tyler. I think nobody ever let you be scared long enough to get good at working your way out of it until now." He nodded, blinking hard, and didn't trust himself to say anything else. My mother's road back was the shortest and the least finished, and I want to be honest with you about that. Instead of tying it into a bow it hasn't earned, she sent a card eventually, months after the dinner. Not an apology exactly, more an acknowledgement that things had been hard and she hoped we could find our way to something easier. We have dinner sometimes now, the 2 of us, and it is polite and careful, and I don't think either of us has said the true version of what happened out loud to the other one yet. I don't know if we ever will. Some relationships get rebuilt on solid new ground. Some just get a smaller, quieter room to exist in, further from the center of things than they used to be. I've made my peace with which one this is. Before my first board meeting after the closing, I went down to the plant floor early, before anyone else arrived. I took the old hard hat off the hook by the side door. Meredith, no, I 29 years old, and I had it properly relabeled that week. $5. 10 minutes at a hardware store. I hung the corrected one back on the same hook. I called Carol that night. I fixed the hat. She was quiet a moment, and I could hear that she was crying a little. "I've been waiting a long time to hear you say something like that." "Thank you," I told her. "For every single time you noticed when nobody else did." I think about that succession party sometimes. The fondant delivery truck, my father's toast, 80 people laughing at a joke that was never actually funny. I used to believe the safe one was the cruelest thing my family ever called me. I know better now. It just meant I was the only one in that family who was ever paying close enough attention to see exactly what was coming, for the company, for the house, for all of it, years before anyone else was willing to look. I didn't stay safe on purpose. I just finally stopped being quiet about everything I'd already seen. If somebody's ever underestimated you for years, and it cost them more than they ever imagined when the truth finally came due, I want to hear about it. Drop a comment, subscribe, and I'll see you In the next one,